Thanks for joining us. I'm here today with Bob Walker. Now, he's our citation recipient for the class of 1971. Now, Bob, you were a double graduate from Avondale, first in 1971 with a Bachelor of Arts in Education, and then again, I believe, in 1989 with a Bachelor of Education, which is secondary. And you've gone on to do so much more since then, and that's what we're going to have a chat about in a moment. But first of all, congratulations, and thanks for taking a moment to have a chat with me.
Well, thank you very much, and for the honour that it has. It sort of struck me. I was a little bit dumbfounded.
Now, we're going to jump back a little bit. So you met your wife, Bev, well, she was Everett at the time when you were studying at Avondale, and you married her the year that followed after your graduation. But what was it that actually brought you to Avondale in the first place?
Well, there are a couple of factors. I had just finished 5 years in the New Zealand Army, and wasn't planning to continue that time in the Army. But I had finished my training as a draftsman, thanks to the Army, and I found that sometimes it was easy to get bumped out of work because of the financial situation that would happen. And that happened, and I thought, this isn't going to be very good if that happens repeatedly, every time there's a credit squeeze. And at the same time, there was a Bible camp out at the North New Zealand campground, and Alan Lindsay was the speaker there. And he mentioned that there were some other courses that were about to happen, particularly for manual arts teaching. I've always had a bit of an interest in practical things, and I thought, well, that might be an opportunity. So I applied, and I was accepted. So once my time had finished in the Army, I was able then to travel to Avondale. I think I carried a very small suitcase, and I mean small. I didn't have much of this world's goods to go to Avondale, but that was what took me there, just as a result of that Bible camp.
Oh, well, Alan Lindsay was a favourite of many.
Indeed, and still.
Now, if we continue sort of back during that time at Avondale, who were some of the friends that you sort of got around with and you hung out with and made at Avondale?
Well, Watson Park had only recently been completed, and so always your roommates were the people that you spent a lot of time with when you lived in the same room with them. John Ashton was a good mate, a fellow by the name of Graham Waters. These were both guys that we did a project when the swimming pool was built. They then wanted some rooms down at the back of there to change in. And so we drew up some plans, and they were part of the team that were involved in that. Along with Clive Butcher. He was the bricklayer or block layer, and we spent time doing that. So those friendships are still alive today.
And this is the pool down behind the cafeteria at college?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Now we'll jump to more closer to today. Can you tell us a little bit about your family and where you're living at the moment?
Okay, well, we have 4 boys. There's no girls, only daughter-in-laws. 3 of those were born in Papua New Guinea, but they're all Australian citizens these days. So they are all bar Casey, the youngest, are married, and we have 6 grandchildren. We currently live in Upper Caboolture. As I said before, we've moved here just 3 months ago onto 3/4 of an acre, and we're gradually getting that into shape.
And you've spent a lot of your skills, I guess, bestowing that upon people over in the mission fields. Can you tell us a little bit about that? You've been Papua New Guinea. Where else have you been doing that?
Okay. We started off at Goroka at Karbiufa, and it was interesting that I was taken up there to be a manual arts teacher, but I think probably in about the first month or so, they said we need a new church. And so as well as teaching a full load, you also had a work line where in the afternoon students would go and work. So you had to look after that. So I had the wood products. And then adding to that was this church program. They'd already demolished the old church, which was a kunai church, just made with a grass roof. And it was quite an exercise to get the Kabiufa church built. It's still there. It's still standing. Interestingly enough, Owen McCutcheon was the Papua New Guinea Union president at the time. At the meeting where we sat, he said, I wanted the church to be closer to the road because we want it to be seen. I remember his comment, and I said, well, all we have to do is to raise the pitch of the roof to 45 degrees and everybody will be able to see it. And so you can. But I'm very glad it's not closer to the road because Highlands Highway goes right through the school campus and it's a very busy road. So it wouldn't have been much joy.
So, Bob, can you share with me what it was like to have young kids, you and Bev, when you were over in the mission fields? It must have been a challenge.
Yeah, there are lots of challenges. Some of our mission stations are quite isolated. It was okay at Kabiufa. We had our oldest Carl there, and that was close to town, no problem. When we went to Kambubu to take up the building course, that was different. There were three major rivers to cross. One was a small river that would come up quickly and go down quickly. We had the Warrangoi River, which was crossed in a rowboat. And then we had another river called the Murrumbu, which often raised up. So our life revolved around those rivers, not only our life, but there were quite a number of young families who had kids in the mission field. And just getting your own supplies was always a challenge. So from Kambubu, we would have 1 day a month that we'd go on a shopping trip. They were always exciting visits, exciting for all the wrong reasons mostly, because you had to be back to the Warrangoi River at a set time in order to be able to get back home. I mentioned the story with our second son, Clinton, but we had a story with our eldest son. It was related to that same time. We had to get from Kambubu to take things back into the transit house in Rabaul. The trouble is the river was up again. Wet season, river was up. The only way we could get across was in a canoe. So he was sitting in the middle of the canoe and two of us were paddling. We went way up the river so that we could get across, and it was full of rooster's tails, which is a lot of white water. And here he is sitting in the canoe, hanging on for dear life while we paddle like anything to get across. And those are the sort of experiences that I think have made them adventurous in lots of ways.
Now, as we said, you've spent so much of your time, teaching manual arts, doing a lot of building projects and sort of servicing those mission fields and a lot of, commercial places back in Australia. But in recent years, you've sort of taken up a different hobby. You're sort of into flying. How did you get into that, and what do you do with that now?
Well, it was always a bit of an interest. A lot of friends that we met in the mission field, Graham Barnett and a few of the other pilots, and I thought, I think I'd like to learn to fly. So I started in the 70s and I finally got my wings in 1977. I haven't done a lot of flying, and I've never, apart from a few flights around the mission field, I've never been responsible for doing any of the flying up there, mainly because you've got to have a license up there, and it was harder to get that sort of training while you're a teacher. But that was a recreational thing and an interesting thing. I have done a little bit of flying. When I get the opportunity to do a little bit now, I still do. I've got friends who fly that attend church at Caboolture. And so we've all got stories to tell about flying. But not a lot of time in flying. It's an expensive hobby.
But I can still see the sparkle in your eye when you talk about it. Well, if we jump one more time back to your time at Avondale, if you can think of someone that may have impacted you positively or someone you might want to thank, a lecturer or a friend, who would that be and why?
Okay, I guess of all of the teachers that I had, Brian Houliston is the one that comes to mind. He was a missionary. He spent time at Cambodia, where we spent 5 years. He was always connected to the mission field. And I used to, because of my drafting skills, you mentioned you'd been to Mount Diamond. Well, the original buildings for Mount Diamond, he got me to draw the plans for those because that was just something that we did. You know, he had a connection. They had sent a message down saying if they could get some plans done, and that's what we did. Brian was he was instrumental in also getting me to do a little bit of teaching in the high school before graduation. So I actually started my teaching career before I had graduated. They were short of a manual arts teacher, and he said, "Well, I think you could do it." And so that was the opportunity. And I still run into some of those students that I taught there at Avondale High School. They're all getting older now, which is something that happens, I guess. But he would be probably the most influential. Barry Plain, who you would probably know. So those guys in the manual arts department were influential in perhaps teaching lots of the values that Avondale espouses and what it makes its it's really what Avondale's about, is those personal values.
Yeah, and look, for those of you watching, there is so much more to Bob's story. So we encourage you to head over to the Avondale Alumni Facebook page or to our website, and you can read his citation there and catch up on all the things he's been doing since his time at Avondale. Bob, you've lived a life of service and of dedication with passion for what you do. So the class of 1971 is honouring you for that this weekend at Homecoming. And no doubt you've transformed lives with all that you've done and all that the skills that you've been given and the accomplishments that you've made in communities have benefited from what you have done. So we just wanted to say thank you and congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's humbling to receive the award, but nonetheless, it's encouraging, and I really appreciate that gesture of the citation.